up here in just a second. There we go. And welcome to those of you joining us on YouTube as well. My name is Jamie Vibach, and I am the Will County Director of the Conservation Foundation. Just so you know, this is a webinar format, so everyone is muted, your cameras are off. This is going to be recorded, so you could enjoy it all over again later if you would like. It will be posted up on our YouTube channel. I usually get them up within about a day. If you have a question, please use that Q&A box. That lets everybody else see it, and it also makes it easier for me to find them all. Questions can sometimes get lost in the chat, but we will make sure to try and answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. For your safety, you should only be able to see what I post in chat, but just in case we missed a setting or somebody gets through, please don't click links other than what I might post in the chat. On the TCF side of things, these webinars are offered to the public for free, but we do encourage you to consider a donation or a membership. The more people we have attending, the more it does cost us to run them. So at the end of the webinar, you're going to be taken to a page with a bunch of resources of things you might be interested in. Our pollinator garden form, or our pollinator garden brochures, brain garden brochures, all that kind of good stuff. Also our virtual tip jar. So if you're enjoying these webinars, I do encourage you to donate to help us keep them running. And also you have the option to become a member, so you can enjoy our wide variety of members only stuff as well. All right, enough of that. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my friends, Nabil and everyone else at Wings and Talons. So go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks everybody for being with us today. My name is Nabil, and we have with us Susie, who is one of our volunteer raptor handlers, and we have a few birds of prey for you guys today. We are coming to you from the Springbrook Nature Center in Itasca. That's where we're housed. We are a group called Wings and Talons. We are a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization, very much like the Conservation Foundation, in that our main mission is to promote conservation, raise awareness, and do a lot of outreach like we're doing right now. Okay, so our first guest that we have today is a red-tailed hawk. Now, a red-tailed hawk is something that I guarantee every one of you has seen, even if you haven't noticed or realized that this is one of the birds you've seen. But more importantly, this is a bird that every one of you has heard. All right, so let me talk a little bit about what we do here. The birds we're seeing today are raptors, or birds of prey. Now, one of the most common and visible and audible forms of wildlife that we have around here are birds. You get to see a bird at least once a day. You get to hear them at least once a day. The birds we have here, being birds of prey, are quite a bit like the other birds that you hear. Most of it is songbirds. But these birds, they share many characteristics of birds. You know, they have feathers, they fly, they have beaks, they make calls. But birds of prey have some very special adaptations that make them eminently suitable to do what they do. The primary difference between a bird of prey and other birds are that a bird of prey has to hunt and catch and kill their prey. That's the reason why we call them birds of prey. Now, in order for them to do that, they have some very special adaptations that we're going to be talking about today. Now, so the first bird you're looking at here is a red-tailed hawk. So she is about 3.5, 4 years old. She's a female. We got her from Texas, I believe. The reason she came to us was that she had flown into a building, and as a result of that, she has some neurological damage and she can't see very well out of one eye. So she can't perceive depth very well. So while she can fly and while she's physically otherwise okay, she wouldn't be able to function very well in the wild, and that's the reason why we have her. And then at this point, she becomes an educational and ambassador bird for her species. All right, so there's a few things that you can see right away in how she looks different from most other birds that you have. Now, a lot of people will look at her and say, oh, is that an eagle? She's quite large, actually. She weighs in at about 3.5 pounds, which is actually quite heavy for a bird. Um, and you can get an idea of her scale. Her wingspan, if she opens up her wings, is about slightly under 4 feet. All right, so let's look at other characteristics. When people say she looks like an eagle, so Susie's gonna, there you go. So you can see that sharp hooked beak, that those brooding eyes, and that's kind of what makes her look that way. So let's look at those pieces that she has. Now she has a sharp hooked beak because she uses that to be able to consume her prey. And we mentioned that she has to hunt her prey being mostly small ground mammals. You're looking at things like rats, mice, squirrels, chipmunks, gophers, rabbits. So these are their primary prey. This is their preferred prey. Them being birds of prey, they're also very opportunistic. So they might go after things like carrion. If they can sneak up on other birds and catch them, they'll do that too. The red tails we have here, one of them actually likes going after snakes, believe it or not. So you saw that one of the things that makes her stand out from most other birds are her sharp hooked beak. Now, right behind that, you can see she's got these eyes. Now, for a bird of prey, like a red-tailed hawk, their mode of hunting is they mostly perch, scan the ground, and then swoop down on their prey. Now, another mode of them hunting is being able to soar, catch thermals up really high, again, scan the ground for their prey, and then swoop down and get their prey. Now, this means that their eyesight has to be very, very good. The one indication of the eyesight being really good is if you compare the size of her eyes relative to the size of her head. Now, if you guys want to hold up your fingers and get an idea of how big your own eyeballs are, they're maybe like a large grape, and compare that to the size of your skull. So your eyes take up maybe 10% of your head space and your skull. Compared to the red-tailed hawk, her eyes take up more than 30% of her skull. Now that gives you an indication of just how important her sense of vision is. Other than that, she also has about 8 times the number of rods and cones that humans have. So from that, we can extrapolate that their vision is probably about 8 times better than ours. So there's no easy way to quantify this, but one way of trying to understand how good their vision is, they're able to spot prey as small as rabbits from like a mile above in height. In more terms that we can understand, if they could read, they could probably read a newspaper at the length of a football field. That's another way of looking at it. So you saw a couple of features that she has. She's got really good vision, and she has this really sharp beak. All right, so the next thing that really makes birds of prey and raptors stand out are their claws or their talons. Now, Susie is going to bring them up really close so you can take a look at her talons, and you can see just how large and hooked they are. Now, her talons are primarily what she uses to subdue and kill her prey. Even though her beak looks very formidable, it's their talons that we're really worried about. You can see that Susie is wearing a leather glove. Now that's about a three-layer piece of leather, and she's sitting on that. Now, if she actually wanted to go through that, she probably could squeeze hard enough. And so one of the things that Susie is doing is also making sure that she stays calm. These large talons to grab her prey. She has these that let her squeezing them and killing them. And it's only after that that she will bring her beak into play and start tearing up the flesh and start consuming her flesh. Okay, so I mentioned that red-tailed hawks are something that you probably have seen. Now, red-tailed hawks are the most common large bird of prey that you can find You can find them all over the United States. You can find them all the way from the Arctic tundra, actually down to the Caribbean. So what does this tell us? This tells us that they're very, very adaptable. They live in various environmental conditions. You can find them all in the desert. You can find them up in the cold and the tundra. And if you drive down the highway, and if you keep your eyes open the next time, sometimes you'll see these large birds perched on the light poles. You'll see them having the typical creamy breast that she has, and you can see that sprinkling of speckles right across her belly. And Susie's going to point out her belly to show you where the sprinkling of the, so those are characteristic marks of a red-tailed hawk. Now she's called a red-tailed hawk because as Susie's going to show you, as Susie's going to show you, she has a rufous or a reddish tail, and that is a trademark sign of a red-tailed hawk. Now, a red-tailed hawk doesn't get her red tail until after she's mature, which is in her second year. So from this, we can actually tell that she is a mature bird. She's more than 2 years old. Now, you can't really see the red tail from below usually, so it's kind of hard to tell. But sometimes when she's flying and soaring up high and the sun is behind her, that red will actually bleed right through, and you can see her reddish tail showing up over there. Okay, the other thing I mentioned was that even if you haven't known that you have seen a red tail, you definitely have heard a red tail. Well, the red tail, one of the things that she's well known for is being a voiceover actor. Now, anytime people show you a picture or a video of an eagle flying about in movies or on videos or on documentaries, you hear these eagles give out these piercing calls that sound very, very regal. That actually is a call of a red-tailed hawk. An eagle doesn't have a call like that. An eagle makes a cackle, which doesn't quite suit the image that we've been trying to portray. So that's what I meant when I said that every one of you has actually heard a red-tailed hawk. Okay, so she is going to go away right now. There's also a couple of things I want to show you while we have her. Susie's going to bring her up real close, and we're going to actually take a look at her feet too. Just bring her really close. Okay. Now, if you notice, you can see that she has, her feet are devoid of any fur, and you can see that she has things that almost look like scales on her feet. And that is an indication of some of their evolutionary traits. The last living remnants of dinosaurs that we have today are birds. And birds and dinosaurs share the same ancestor, being reptiles, and that's why you can see that some of those characteristics are still there. She has those scaly feet, she's got those sharp talons, she's got the bone structure of a lot of the dinosaurs that they used to have back there. So what you're also seeing is something that has been with us for millions of years. Okay, now Susie's going to put the red tail away, and we are going to meet, you can just take it back. And we're going to meet some of our other birds in a little bit. Susie's going to get off camera in a little bit, and I'm going to come over here and talk a little bit while we get one of our other birds. Okay. Why are birds of prey important? Yes, they're cool, but what we need to realize is that what you're seeing is a bird at the top of its food chain, at the top of the food pyramid. And these birds are not exotic. These are birds that you can find around here. They live among us. So what does this mean? This means that in order for them to be at the top of the food chain and thrive, and us be able to see them, we need to have a very vibrant and healthy ecosystem, all the way from the ground, from the microorganisms there, to the little bugs, to the larger bugs, to the mice and other rodents that eat them, to the worms that are consumed, to the other birds that eat them, all the way to the top of the food chain. So one of the things that we call birds of prey are indicator species. What this means is that If you see these birds around you and they are in good shape, they are a good indication of the environment and the health of the ecosystem that we live in. The Conservation Foundation promotes the spread and conservation of green natural areas. And for these animals to live in, there's three things that they need: habitat, habitat, and habitat. That's the primary thing that we can give them. They've survived here for millions of years. They have been here even before any humans ever set foot on this continent. We have come into this country and we have radically changed the landscape of where we live. And these birds are still with us. What does that mean? That tells us that these are very, very adaptable creatures. Now, we are in times where we have in our hands the power to be able to change the environment to suit us. If we can make sure that we also take into consideration these wild animals live with us, live close to us, that would be the best thing that we can do in order for us to protect our heritage. And for not just for ourselves, it's also for our children and for our grandchildren. This is the kind of place we want to live in. We want to live in a place that supports wildlife, that supports nature. In times like these, people realize just how much they miss. There's an increased interest in nature, things that you didn't realize we took for granted. Let's take this opportunity to make sure that we open our eyes to what's around us. You know, we are surrounded by wildlife. We are very lucky. We live in one of the most crowded and advanced cities in the world, and yet we have wildlife that's just outside our doors. Even in the cities, our cities, if you believe it or not, they have the fastest land animal in the world. The peregrine falcon, you can find them in downtown Chicago. Not many other places. Most other places, you have to go far away in order to coexist with wildlife. We are lucky that we have this opportunity for us to wake up. Any of you can walk out your doors. It wouldn't be uncommon for you guys to see a wild animal. Many of you have seen coyotes, foxes. You can see owls. Every one of you has heard an owl hoot, whether you see it or not. Okay, our next bird that's going to come up is a barn owl. If you just give me a moment, I'm going to step off camera, get her, and I'll be back in a second. Now, this is a bird that I guarantee every one of you has heard of. This is a barn owl, B-A-R-N, barn owl. Now, unfortunately, though, the chances of you seeing a barn owl are very low. And all of our birds that we have here are injured in some form or the other. They can't be released to the wild, except for her. We got her as a hatchling, and she's here for a very special reason. Barn owls are almost non-existent in Illinois. Illinois used to be called the Prairie State. And today we only have less than there's a small percentage there's a fraction of a percent of prairie and meadowland left. Loss of habitat means that barn owls, we no longer find barn owls very easily in Illinois. So barn owls are voracious rodent hunters. So let's talk a little bit about, she also being a bird of prey, she is almost a radical opposite of the red-tailed hawk that we saw before. Now owls are very, very recognizable. You look at an owl, you can tell that's an owl. So one of the things that makes it that way is her face. As you can see, she is also very curious. So she almost has a face. There's a forward facing, she has eyes in the front. She also has she shares a lot of the same characteristics. She has that sharp hooked beak. She also has talons, though not quite as massive as the red-tailed hawks. So let's talk a little bit about her senses. Now, the red-tailed hawk, you know, hunts during the daytime, so that's a diurnal bird. So her vision is of prime importance. For a barn owl is an animal that hunts at night. She is a nocturnal animal. So for her, vision is really good. She has really good low light vision. And more importantly, she has an extraordinary and exquisitely tuned sense of hearing. What she's actually doing right now, when she keeps moving back and forth, is she's actually scoping out the place. This is a new place for her. So she's checking out the place and trying to hear the different things that are happening over there. You know, her hearing is so good, she can actually hear the heartbeat of a mouse far away. And not just that, she can determine what kind of animal is it. She almost can triangulate just by hearing. So the way she hears is that she has her ears also pretty much in the same place where we would have our ears, right behind her eyes. Now, I also want you to notice her facial disc. She has that little outline that goes right around her face. I'm going to hand off this bird to Susie, and we will continue talking about her in a second. So I was talking about her facial disc. Now that's something that actually lets her hear really well. Now, humans have an ear, you also have these earlobes, and your earlobes help you funnel and focus the sound. You can't see her ears because they're under her feathers, but she actually has really large eardrums compared to the rest of her head. Oh, we can't really see that right now. But one of her special adaptations is that the feathers around her facial disc are special. Is it too bright? Almost too bright. The feathers around her facial disc are special in that they can actually reflect sound. So if you know, and I'm not sure you can see the lay of the feathers, but they actually point in a way towards her ears being right behind her eyes. So they act in a form to be able to funnel the sounds that she hears. In addition to that, if we took a look at her skull, you'll find that one of her ears is actually lower than the other ear. So what she's doing right there when she's scanning, she's actually trying to paint a picture of what she's hearing so she can get an idea of the surroundings almost in 3D. So when she moves back and forth, when she moves her head back and forth and up and down, she's able to hear sounds from different directions, and her brain can compute how far away these sounds are, what these sounds are. And this is kind of helpful for her too, especially in winter. She can hear mice scrambling around even under snow. She can pinpoint exactly where they are, and she can reach right through the snow with her long feet and pull her prey right out from under the snow, even without looking at them. So, and one of her other special characteristic that she doesn't share with the red-tailed hawk is that she has extraordinarily good hearing. Now, a red-tailed hawk hunts in the daytime, and that's a bird that they can't really sneak up behind their prey, so she has to use speed. Owls, on the other hand, don't fly very fast, but what she can do is fly extremely stealthily. Now, if she flaps her wings, you won't be able to hear any sound at all. Her feathers have a very special adaptation in that the end of the feathers are fringed such that the air currents flowing over them form vortices, and they totally cancel out any kind of noise. They've tried to make recordings, and even very sensitive microphones can't pick up a barn owl when they fly. So think about this. They kind of need to be able to not make any noise if being able to hear their prey is a primary method for them to locate it. They make noise that kind of drowns it out. Now, mice and other prey like that also have very, very, very good hearing. So in order for them to be successful, they have to be able to sneak up behind their prey extremely silently. So that is our barn owl. Now, again, it's kind of a sad story that we don't have many barn owls in Illinois anymore. If we use her, she is an ambassador for her species. and not just a species, but for all of us actually. She tells us the importance of why we need to have natural spaces around us, not just lawns, but we're looking at native plants, the way things used to be here. The creatures that we have living over here have evolved to take full advantage of the kind of vegetation that's natural for us. The more of these we promote, the more of this, the better it becomes for us. Okay, she's going to go away for a little bit, and we're going to bring another bird of prey for you guys here today. Now, while Susie brings out the bird, I'd like to mention, again, some of the work that the Conservation Foundation is doing. Every time you save and preserve an area of wilderness, a natural area of wilderness, even it could be a really small area, even if it's within our cities, within our suburbs, it's really important, because anytime we have these small islands and pockets of nature around us, it increases dramatically the chances of all these wild animals being able to live and thrive amongst us. Now, and an advantage of birds is that they can actually fly to these places. So that's one good thing. They don't have to be continuous large areas. So you can make a difference, even if you have a small portion, your backyard. Get rid of lawns if you can. Try to grow native plants. In a small way, you can make a difference. Anytime you have native plants, a native meadow-like structure growing around here, they promote the kind of animals, the kind of creatures, the entire ecosystem that we live around, that's able to sustain the kind of animals that we want. Okay, so Susie is going to bring up our next visitor, who is an American kestrel, Kestrel. He's being a little jumpy while Susie's getting under control. There you go. All right. This bird of prey, he's about as large as a robin, but believe it or not, he is actually a deadly killer. Now, an American kestrel, he's a male. He has these very vivid colors that you can see. A female of the species doesn't have the slate gray, the slate blue coloring that he has. All right, another thing I want you to notice is the length of his wings. They're really long and pointed, and also the length of his tail. Now, he has a few of the same other characteristics. Susie's going to bring him closer so you can see his beak. Let's give him a little adjust if he needs to. And you can see that he has the same sharp curved beak. And he also has talons that are pretty much the same as the other ones, kind of smaller though. And if you look at his feet, you can see they're a lot more slender than the other birds. So from these, there's a few things that we can infer. One, that he has the sharp hooked beak makes him a bird of prey. He has to kill and catch what he eats. Now, the shape of his body though, being long and sleek, his wings, if he spreads them out, he has a wingspan of about slightly over 2 feet. If he spreads them out, you'll find them all long and pointed. And his tail being really long, this means that he's extremely agile and acrobatic in the air. Well, that's because an American kestrel is a falcon. He's actually the smallest of the falcons that you can find in the Americas. A falcon is a bird that primarily hunts other birds. He will take birds his own size. He can take down sparrows, robins, thrushes, starlings. He also will go after crickets, insects, mice, if he can catch them. But the way he's built, he's built for speed. And he's got these really long, slender feet that he can use to catch in midair his prey and kill them. A characteristic feature of a falcon is those stripes that you can see under their eyes. Those are called malar stripes. So he has two, which is characteristic of a kestrel. If you see peregrine falcons, they have, I think, one right under the eye, if you can see them. All right, so Susie's going to bring him up really close and show his beak. There's another feature, I'm not sure you can see that very close, but one of the special adaptations that he has in his beak is, that's getting a little bit out of focus, but right there. There we go. There you go. All right, so look at his upper beak, right under his nose. You can see that there's a little, there's a little dip. That special shape is something called a tomial notch. What he uses that for, that's a very special adaptation. When he catches his prey in flight, if he catches another bird, he can slip that notch in between the neck vertebrae of his prey and kill them instantly. So that's a very special shape that he has. Another thing I want you to see is, if you can look at his nostril, right where the yellow part of his, just above his beak, you can see that there's a little protuberance right in the center of it. So you can see his nostril, and there's a little piece over there. That piece is something that you can find in falcons. Now he's a bird that can fly extremely fast. Not as fast as a peregrine falcon, but one of the things that helps him when he does his high-speed flights and dives. Now, remember, peregrine falcons have been clocked at more than 250 miles an hour when they dive. Now that is pulling more G's than a highly trained fighter pilot can take. So when he's flying that fast, the wind blows, the air goes past his nose so fast that he won't be able to breathe. So that adaptation helps break down and slow down the airflow so he can breathe while he does his speedy things. Now, as you can see, his eyes are still, again, quite larger in comparison with the rest of his skull. Again, that gives an indication of just how good his eyesight is. Another thing that is very interesting about kestrels is that they can see in wavelengths that we can't. One of the things they can actually see in ultraviolet. And that's important for them because one of their prey is also mice. And mice in the wild tend to follow the same paths as they go back and forth. And mice have this habit of dribbling urine as they go along. Now, that will fluoresce under ultraviolet light. You can't see it with a normal vision. But that's one of the things that kestrels can see. They can see these trails, and then they know that these are places that mice are, and they can set up around where these mice are, and that's one of the places they'll hunt from. Right. So this kestrel, he looks fine. He is about, he's at least 10 years old. Now in the wild, they can expect, if they get past their first year, which is their mortality rate from being a chick to an adult is close to 30 to 40%. If he gets past that, he could expect to live to be maybe 10 or 12 years old. And we don't know how old he is. When we got him, he already wasn't a full-grown adult, and we've had him for about 12 years, 10 years now. He looks fine except for his left wing, which has an injury on it. He's actually the most local bird that we have. He comes to us from Willowbrook, actually. He was in one of our suburbs over here in DuPage. They found him in the rafters of a factory. He'd gone in there and he'd gotten injured, and so they brought him in. His wing wouldn't heal fully. He can fly, but not well enough to be able to hunt and survive in the wild. Okay, so there we have it. We've met 3 types of birds of prey today. We saw a red-tailed hawk, we saw a barn owl, and right now we have the American kestrel. Now, all of these are birds of prey, but they also represent the kinds of birds of prey that we have here. Red-tailed hawks are large, diurnal, ground animal hunting birds. Barn owls, again, are medium-sized, night hunting creatures. Kestrels are the other extreme. They're kind of a small daytime hunting bird. It's very fascinating that you can see all of these coexisting in the same ecosystem. They get along very well. They have different sizes, they have different prey, they have different times in which they hunt. The kestrels will go after much smaller prey. Red tails go after much larger prey, and this is how they're all able to coexist in the same place. Kestrels, again, they are in decline in Illinois. Again, loss of habitat. The kind of habitat that most of these birds have evolved are large meadowlands with stands of trees. And if you came to this country 200, 300 years ago, that's what you would have seen. Huge, rich, varied meadowlands with large stands of trees. Our birds are perfectly adapted to that. They would roost and perch in these trees and scan the ground around them. That was rich, that was very diverse. You could have lots of prey. Once we came in, we started radically changing the face of our landscape. We had these large crops, monoculture crops. We took down small stands of trees. And with that, we've seen that there's been drastic habitat loss for these birds. It's not too late though. These birds are still here. You can still find, you can still go out in the wild. You should be able to see kestrels. We have nest boxes out there. We're trying to see if they can come back. But this gives us a reminder of just what we have to lose if we don't appreciate us being able to preserve, and not just preserve, but also expand the natural spaces that we have. Okay, Jamie, I'm gonna take a break for questions if anybody has. We've been speaking for too long right now.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for introducing us to these beautiful animals. I have to say, I absolutely love kestrels. I think their coloring is just so gorgeous.
Absolutely.
I love seeing them. I always see them up on the telephone wires as I'm driving.
Right.
And you can always tell.
As you can see, and it's interesting because once you see these birds, you'll start noticing them. And that's one of the things we'd really like people to know. You know, once you see these birds, keep your eyes around. You can see that they will be around us. You've driven past telephone poles all the time. You've driven past wires all the time. But once you see a kestrel, and Susie's going to try to show you one of his characteristics. Move, see if he can move his head around. Okay. All right. So just watch right there where his head stays in one place while the rest of his body moves. Now that is one of the things that he can do, because remember, he has binocular vision, which means he has to focus on his prey even if there's a large flock out there. And remember, his prey is flying and he's chasing them. So in order for him to watch where they're going, he has to keep his head steady. Or if he's sitting on those telephone wires, he's sitting on a branch that's shaking in the wind, he still has to keep his head straight and focus on what he's doing. So that's one of the great adaptations that he has. Sorry, go ahead, Jamie. I couldn't resist.
That looks almost unreal. Wow. That's so amazing. But yeah, you know, before I learned about them, I had no idea they were even here. And then once you learn about them and you start looking for them, all of a sudden you start seeing them all over the place.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's great. Mike says he's got a group of young kestrels in Bucktown, Chicago. Can they survive in the city?
They'll be fine. I mean, if they're there. So here's the thing. Most birds will raise a brood if they can raise them there successfully. If there's a young brood there, that's actually great, because one of the things we worked with some of the DuPage conservation officials, they put out nest boxes and they find that sometimes they don't get populated. They just pick some weird spot, and we still don't know why they pick the spots that they do. And if you have something like that, it is just absolutely fantastic. Again, it's a sign that that habitat is vibrant and healthy, even in the city, right? If they're able to be there, if they're able to lay and successfully raise a brood, which means they have their prey around, they have sufficient prey for them to be able to maintain that range and raise their brood, which I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place, but that's actually another thing that we like to emphasize. If you live in the city, and what do we do when we see mice and rats? The first thing we reach for is poison to get rid of them.
Right.
Now, that's a terrible thing to do, because the way these poisons are designed for a slow and painful death away from your place. You know, you don't want them dying in your house. So they make them weak enough that they crawl out of your house, get away, and go die somewhere else. But the problem is when they go outside, now they're in a weakened state. And a weakened state is when they attract the most attention, and they're the most susceptible to poisoning the rest of the food chain. So one of the things, if you really appreciate all these birds being around you, especially in the city, we have garbage and things like that. One of the things we try to do is get rid of them by poison. Do other things, you know, keep your garbage closed, keep them trash, keep areas where rats and mice might congregate, to keep them clear. If you do that, in your own small way, you can contribute towards this. Go ahead, Jamie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Poisons are, it's really a shame. I've seen several pictures of hawks and other raptors who've died. And when they do the necropsy afterwards, they find out that it's because they had eaten a poisoned mouse. So
Right.
definitely want to avoid those. Even something like a snap trap is much preferable.
Absolutely.
It's a much
Absolutely.
faster death, and
Absolutely.
you don't have to worry about that poison getting into the ecosystem. So fantastic. Um, Another question, is it true that hawks are afraid of owls? Will owls go after a hawk?
That's a very interesting question. Now, one of the other birds we have over here that we haven't seen today is a great horned owl. Now, a great horned owl, they're very common around here. Everyone has heard a great horned owl hoot. You hardly ever get to see them, but she is absolute alpha predator around here. Nobody messes with a great horned owl. A great horned owl is extremely strong. They can kill skunk. That's a large, not just kill, they can kill and carry skunk, right? So she can absolutely take down hawks. One of the things you'll see that hawks, they don't see very well at night. So the first thing they'll try to do is when it gets dark is find a safe place to roost. And they know that if they're caught out in the open, they become prey for owls. And well, maybe not the barn owl that we saw, but a great horned owl most definitely could kill a red-tailed hawk and take one of those out, yes.
I find it very interesting too that their sense of smell is not very good, which is another reason why a great horned owl will take down a skunk.
Will take down a skunk, right? And you can, well, one of our other birds over here is a turkey vulture, which is the other end. She has the most finely developed sense of smell of pretty much all animals in the U.S. You know, she can smell carrion from up to a mile away. On the other end, you have great horned owls, which have a very, very minimal sense of smell. So having a skunk doesn't bother her. In fact, if you walk down a forest preserve and at the bottom of a tree, if you see pieces of skunk, a very good chance there's a nesting female up there. She's using a skunk to feed her young.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, and the different sounds, you had mentioned earlier how they frequently will use red-tailed hawk calls in place of eagles. And it's a big joke among naturalists that, you know, red-tailed hawks have their ventriloquists. They're ventriloquists. But, the barn owl that you brought out, their calls freak me out. Because
well, you know,
that's
a very good point that you brought up. Now, she's normally very, very vocal. She makes this horrible screech that's very scary. She actually just ate, and so has been really quiet today. Now, so somebody wanted to see her. Let me see if I can get her actually. Now, so let's talk a little bit about barn owls and why they got the reputation that they have. You know, remember we said how they lost their habitat once we came in and started farming here. So then when we first came in and farmed, we didn't have these large commercial tracts of land, but we did have a smaller farms. And so when our farmers came in, even though they took down trees, we had many barns, which were good structures that barn owls could live in. And this is the first time most of our people actually saw barn owls. So well, think about this. You're in a barn. It's a very spooky place. It's dark at night. You go in there, and I tell you, she flies extremely silently. If she spreads her wings, the undersides of her wings are also very pale colored, just like a breast and just like her belly and her face. So you have this thing that's extremely silent. Just comes floating out of the darkness and has this ungodly shriek.
It's like someone being murdered.
Perfect backdrop for Halloween.
I am convinced that's where so many of these ghost stories came from back in the day.
Absolutely.
It sounds like someone being murdered. It's this
exactly
very unearthly screaming kind of sound. It's terrible.
And mostly she's really vocal. She's eaten, and so she's quiet, and so normally she's...
Yeah, and then you can contrast that with a great horned owl that, you know, that's the the stereotypical owl who kind of call.
Right, right. And that's a really great point to bring up, because most people have heard some kind of a hoot. Barred owls and great horned owls are quite common around here. I'm not very good at vocalizing, but the great horned owl would go hoo 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 hoo. I'm sure you've heard those things. Barred owls are also something you can hear sometimes. They have like a 9-note call that goes, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?
I like that one. Yes. So I've had some friends who are very good at calling in owls, and when we've done night hikes and things, they do these calls and you can hear them off in the distance, and then you try and imitate the calls a little bit, and then the next thing you know, it's right over your head.
It's right over your head, right. And they will actually respond to that. Now, it's very interesting. You can call out to owls. The only thing I'd caution is that the reason they're doing that is one of two things. Either looking for a mate, or they're just taking out territory. Mm-hmm. So just don't get too overzealous if you're doing that in nesting times, which is around late winter, because then they might move away. You might sound more aggressive, like a bigger owl, and so just keep that in mind. But you're right, it's very interesting. You can actually hear them, you can call out to them, you can hear them calling back.
Oh yeah, they're really fantastic. Amanda wants to know, what's the difference between these birds' hunting styles?
Okay, so let's think about this. It depends on the prey and the way that they hunt, right? So red-tailed hawks, there's two modes of hunting. Red-tailed hawks go mostly after ground animals, so just scanning the ground. So you're looking at, did either perch somewhere placed high. In the absence of trees, you'll find them perching on telephone poles. So their normal habitat would be stands of trees with open grassland in front of them. And if you check out our highways, that's pretty much what they are. You've got these telephone poles, and you've got these strips of grass in between the medians and places like that, where we typically have on native plants. So that's one mode of hunting for a red-tailed hawk. Another mode of hunting is, red-tailed hawks, most birds of prey, they don't really flap around too much. They try to hit, they're exquisite flyers. They hit thermals, and they're able to soar for miles and miles, really high, without expending a lot of energy. So from up high, they'll scan the ground. Again, you're looking at open grassland, scan the ground, see movement, dive down, it's called a stoop, and get their prey. So that would be a red-tailed hawk. Birds like the kestrel and the falcon would, again, you wouldn't see them hovering on large thermals. You're looking at smaller prey. You'd see them either perched on trees or telephone wires. Again, they're scanning the ground below them. I forgot to mention, but there's one very characteristic and very cool feature about kestrels, is that they're one of the few birds that have the ability to hover in place. Hovering is an extremely resource intensive and a very acrobatic thing to do. Now, hummingbirds, that's a different, they're on a whole different level, but kestrels can actually stand in place. So sometimes if you're driving down the highway, if you see something hovering over the median strip, it's most likely a kestrel. So that's not, they can stand in place, check the ground below them for their prey, drop down, grab their prey. Another mode of hunting for kestrels, if they're chasing other birds or chasing other bugs on the wing, you'll find them actually chasing them. And with their long tail that helps them steer, really agile, their long pointed wings, you can find them chasing them through bushes, through other low-lying vegetation. So that would be a mode of hunting for a kestrel. Owls don't use speed, don't use agility. What they do use is stealth. So they're extremely quiet. They fly much slower, sneak up behind their prey. And most of the time, the only time the prey knows that the owl is there is when they feel their talons on their back. At that time, it's too low. At that time, it's too late. So mode of hunting, time of hunting. So owls hunting at night, you can't really chase things around at night. You need to be able to see them very well, hear them very well, and sneak up behind them. The daytime birds, you can't really sneak up behind prey very easily. In the daytime, they can see you, so they use speed in order to get them. So that will be the primary differences in the way that these birds hunt.
Okay. Annette wants to know, do you recommend that we place a nest box in our yards? And if so, what features are required for them?
Okay, well, always having nest boxes is a great thing. Um, Features, there's very specific uh, recommendations on how large these boxes should be, but more importantly, more than the boxes themselves, it's the location, it's the habitat that's there. You can have the most beautiful nest box out there, but if there isn't the habitat around them to be able to support that, it's kind of it becomes a fruitless exercise. So you can the Audubon Society has many links on how to on very specific types of nest boxes you can construct. They also have recommendations on what kind of places they need to be in. But more important than that, again, it's a space. We can make all the most beautiful nest boxes out there. If we can expend a lot more energy, even in your backyard, make a small place of refuge, how the land used to be, using native plants, even a small, tiny pocket makes a huge difference. The more of these are there, then the more of these birds will be around. They'll be looking for places to nest, and then the nest boxes will actually also be of use. So, on that point, though, one of the things we tend to do is when we see dead trees, we tend to take them out because they tend to be considered as an eyesore. What we don't realize is that a dead tree is actually full of life. It's full of grubs, it's full of beetles, it's full of all kinds of things that are sustaining on that. More importantly, it's also full of cavities. And owls don't really build nests. Well, except the great horned owl. She'll just go take over a crow's nest or a red-tailed nest, and she's just strong enough to move and do whatever she wants. But most other owls, they'll find cavities. They don't build nests. And so having these kind of cavities out there with dead trees, deadfall, all of these are good things that you can do to promote more wildlife in our neighborhoods. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, we always talk about if you want to attract more of something to your yard, you have to provide food, water, and shelter for them.
And shelter,
and so,
yes.
you know, food is a really big one. If there's nothing for them to eat, they're not going to move in. So having the native plants, as you mentioned earlier, that will attract other things, even things like chipmunks. And boy, we had a pair of great horned owls in our neighborhood, and that year our chipmunk populations went way down, let me tell you.
And these things tend to be in balance, right? You see a huge population of rabbits around here. If you have too many of them, then they die out. They eat too many things that causes trouble. Now for songbirds, you can always put out bird seed. You can't really put out pieces of meat for these birds. What you can do, on the other hand, is to have exactly like what you mentioned. Provide the kind of place where their prey naturally grows.
And we also joke occasionally your bird feeder will be an actual bird
a bird
feeder.
Absolutely. Well, we don't have a Cooper's hawk with us yet, but that's one of the most fascinating birds out there.
They're amazing. Oh, the way they can fly through the woods. Yeah, they're very, very cool too. Patricia says, I've seen red-winged blackbirds attacking hawks in flight. Do they cause significant harm?
No, they don't. But red-winged blackbirds, as you know, especially in our nesting season, they're really aggressive. You walk around them, they will come and attack you. Now, what these birds will do is they recognize that these birds of prey are potentially a threat. Now, even owls, they don't normally go after these birds, but if they come upon them when they're roosting, they will happily eat them. So they recognize so what they'll do is very interesting behavior, though. They'll start raising an alarm, and you'll find that other songbirds also join in. So they actually have this huge mob of birds that goes and harasses these other birds and kind of chases and tell them, we know you're here. We've got an eye on you. Just keep moving along. But they can't really cause any harm. And most of the time, you'll find these birds, they'll just ignore them, or they'll all right, this is too pesky, and they'll move along. So that's what they're trying to do. But they can't really they don't cause much damage at that point. It's interesting to see that behavior, though.
Oh, it is. It's very fascinating. I've seen that a few times. We'll have some hawks flying around the neighborhood, and next thing you know, there's this whole group of things just mobbing them. And
mobbing them.
Fine, I'm out of here. Susan wants to know what the bird is that's on your shirt in your logo.
All right, so Susie's going to model our logo for us. It's kind of a fictionalized bird. It's not a real bird. We try to come up with something that is representative of the different birds. It's kind of a falcon. It's kind of a it's a logo. What can I say?
And I understand her point. She said it kind of looks like a sandhill crane. And if you look at it since it's a little fuzzy on the screen, it does almost look like a sandhill crane.
It does. Yeah, we're trying to go for a raptor.
What
And so
doesn't show up is the brown part, which really kind of
Yeah.
outlines the look of a hawk. But yeah.
And Jane says, Susie is great with the birds. Your arm must be very strong.
oh, Susie, Susie is really strong. We don't mess with Susie.
Thank you.
Well, actually, on that note, anybody wants to take a guess at how heavy the barn owl might be? I can't really see your participants, but raise your hands and your fingers so Jamie can see. And let's see how many.
Yeah, post in the chat. How heavy do you think that barn owl is? And only we get to see, so we can't cheat on each other. See, 4 pounds, 2 pounds,
9 pounds,
5 pounds, 8 ounces.
That's a little bit. Okay, actually, what was it? All right, so Stephanie and others who went around 1 pound, that's about right. So she's actually 16, 15 something ounces. And she, 16.5, she's just over. They're very light. Remember, they have to fly, catch their prey and fly. So she's mostly feathers. She's got very, very strong bones. Her bones are hollow, by the way, too. Extremely strong, but hollow. And she's mostly feathers. She's playing with her equipment right now. So I wish I had well, if you look at an X-ray of these birds, they're very, very disturbing. They're mostly feathers. Their actual body mass is centralized to the center of their body, and she isn't very heavy. So you're right. So about a pound.
Okay, very good. And then one last question, and I really wanted to pose this question to you because it is something that those of us who are naturalists and in the nature center arena hear quite frequently. Is there an issue with hawks and owls going after small dogs?
Okay, so like most news, anytime that happens, it does get sensationalized. It's not something that wouldn't happen. So let's think about this. Hawks and eagles, they have to learn how to hunt. There's a little bit of instinct in them, but they also, in their first year, they're taught how to hunt and they learn how to hunt. They learn how to go after different prey. Now, it takes a while for them to realize what kind of prey is the best for them and how to attack them. So anytime you see a small, they have their preferred prey, right? So owls are normally not going to go after dogs. That never was a natural prey. They'll go after rodents and other animals like that. Same thing with hawks. They go after like ground mammals and animals. Now, in their first year, when they're learning to hunt, sometimes when they see small creatures like this, they might go after them. We also have a tendency to have these small, tiny pocket dogs that we walk around with, which, look at a wolf and look at a chihuahua, look at how different they are, right? So it's also a little bit confusing for them. But a mature bird learns about these things and lets them go. So sometimes you might find them mistakenly going after these creatures. But that being said, though, a great horned owl, a great horned owl can catch and kill something about 3 times her body mass, right? So a large female great horned owl around here would weigh maybe 5 pounds, which means she can easily take something that's about 15 pounds, kill and carry it away. So you have a small dog or cat, best thing you can do is keep them leashed. They don't catch them to carry them away and eat them. So if they find them on a leash, after the first time they attack them, they learn that, oh, this isn't what it seems it is, and go away. But the best thing you can do is, keep small animals leashed. They really shouldn't be outdoors unsupervised.
And staying close to them helps too.
And staying close to them helps, actually, absolutely. I mean, a much bigger threat is coyotes and foxes. Actually, coyotes more than foxes, yeah.
Yeah, and someone also said they've seen a hawk go after a cat, which, again, as you said, could happen, especially a juvenile learning. But cats and dogs tend to be what we call high-risk prey. Like the bird is risking injury because they're going to fight back.
Right. Well, especially cats. I mean, if you notice the cat, they have extremely loose skin and they're very, very flexible. So once they grab a cat, you can't really grab it. You're grabbing loose skin. The cat turns around, sharp claws, goes around, scratches. And so once they learn that this is prey not to be messed with, they'll leave them alone. So
Yeah,
you're
they'll
absolutely
stay
right.
away after that. So
Juveniles learning while they're hunting, and we can do our part. Don't leave them unleashed. Don't leave them. These are pets that are dependent on you. You don't leave them outside by
right,
themselves. Just
right.
you take the responsibility to be with them all the time.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up with that. And thank you so much for coming out, for sharing your animals with us today. This was absolutely fascinating. I always love getting a chance to see some live birds. So we definitely appreciate your shout outs to the Conservation Foundation. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you will join us next week when we're going to be talking about fall cleanup and leaving the leaves. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Wings and Talons. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Nabil. And thank you to all of our animal friends today. So
you're welcome. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Take care, and we hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.